Alien fleet incursion shattered in 41 sec. Earth's defenses were waiting. The Galactic Concord had existed for 12,000 years, and it had never heard silence like this. Not the silence before a vote, not the silence after. This was the silence of 4,201 delegates holding their breath at the same time, in the same hall, while a man explained why 41 seconds was a myth. Archivist Yal stood in the observer gallery and watched Fleet Marshal Korath Vex speak. Yal had a data tablet in his hands. The tablet had 847 files on it, one for each testimony, one for each warning filed in the last 287 years. His fingers were steady. He had expected this day for a long time. The hall of arbitration smelled of ozone, old parchment, and the sweet rot of political compromise. The humans, Korath said, have not registered Saul under any treaty. They have not petitioned for protected status. They have not responded to 3 formal approaches in as many centuries. He paused. He was 847 years old. His skin was the color of dried blood. His eyes were black like the space between stars. He had taken 11 worlds. He spoke the way conquerors speak when no one has ever said no. I move that the exclusion zone around their system be dissolved. Yal's lips moved. The young diplomat beside him, Thessaly Vex, Korath's own daughter, assigned to Concord as an observer, turned. Archivist. He believes the 41 seconds are a story, Yal whispered. He has never heard what silence sounds like when it ends. Thessaly looked at her father. Korath was already at the speaking platform, already reading his motion. He did not look toward the observer gallery. He did not look toward the old archivist who had been filing warnings for 287 years. He had never looked toward Yal, not once. The vote took 11 minutes. 4,112 in favor, 89 opposed. No abstentions. The Concord had not bothered with abstentions. Fleet Marshal Korath Vex was authorized to proceed with Solward Incursion. 2,400 ships, 890,000 crew. First contact to be managed at the fleet commander's discretion, meaning his discretion, meaning there was no first contact planned at all. Yal watched the tally board. He read it 3 times. He touched the badge on his lapel, a small bronze pin, the mark of a senior archivist. The metal was cold. He has never heard what silence sounds like when it ends. The word wait hung in the air. It had not been spoken. It lived in the shape of things that would not happen, in the 89 votes against, in Thessaly's face, still turned toward her father, in the 847 files on a tablet that 4,112 delegates had decided not to read. No warning, no declaration, no mercy. The Concord moved on to the next item of business. What happened at second 41 changed everything. Stay with me, the countdown is just beginning. 72 hours before the vote, Luna Station smelled like recycled air and jasmine. Commander Tanaka Akafor poured tea into a cracked cup. The crack ran from the rim to the base in a thin diagonal line, sealed years ago with silver kintsugi. The repair had cost more than the cup. She had paid it anyway. She lifted the cup, felt the warmth in her palms, and set it against her lip. Outside her viewport, the moon curved away in gray silence. Earth hung beyond it, blue and patient. She was on her 3rd cup when the alert came. A single low chime, the kind designed not to startle, only to inform. She set down the cup. The ceramic clicked against the saucer. She read the screen. Vorthani Fleet, Solward Vector, 2,400 ships. ETA, 72 hours. She read it again. She picked up the cup and drank the rest of the tea in one pull, cold now, jasmine thin at the bottom. Then she opened a comm channel. Captain Voss appeared on the screen 3 seconds later. He was a big man with grease under his fingernails from orbital maintenance. He still did his own maintenance. Tanaka Akafor had always liked that about him. Commander, he held a wrench in one hand. He put it down off screen. I assume you've seen. I have. The crucible is green across all 14,000 nodes. He paused. Something moved behind his eyes, not fear, not excitement. Something older and harder to name. Some of the older units are eager. She thought about that word, eager. A machine does not get eager, but Voss was not a man who said things he didn't mean. She looked at the viewport, the moon, Earth. Let them wait, she said. She set down the cup. The silver seam caught the light. Luna Station had 43 officers on duty when the Crucible status report came through. Tanaka Akafer read it standing up, at the main display console, while the rest of the room pretended to focus on their own screens. She did not explain what she was thinking. That was not new. In 14 years of silence, 14 years since the last human spoke at a Concord session, 14 years since the Concord stopped taking their calls, Tanaka Akafer had done her explaining in other ways. She had built the maintenance rotation. She had ensured the geothermal taps on Mercury kept the older nodes warm. She had reviewed the propagation calculus herself, once a year, alone, in a room with no recording equipment. She had checked the math. The math had not changed. She pulled up a second screen. Node distribution. 14,000 points mapped across the inner system, Mercury, Venus, the Belt, the L4 and L5 clusters of Earth's own orbit. They were not obvious. They did not glow. If you did not know what you were looking at, you would see an asteroid catalog and a maintenance grid. She knew what she was looking at. She closed the screen, picked up her cold tea, drank the last drop. 14 years of silence. 1 cup of jasmine tea a day. 1 year, 1 calculation, 1 maintenance rotation at a time. Let them wait, she had said. She had first said it 11 years ago, to a young lieutenant who asked what they would do if the Concord came. She had said it 6 years ago, to a diplomat who arrived at Luna Station with a very polite message about voluntary compliance. She had said it 3 years ago, to herself in the middle of the night, in a room that smelled of recycled air and cold tea. The Vorthani fleet was 72 hours out. She walked back to her desk, sat down, poured another cup. On Mercury Station, Lieutenant Commander Adiz Oduya was already at her console when the alert came through. She had been there for 4 hours. That was not unusual. What was unusual was the number on her screen. 60. Red, counting down. The 60 seconds were not yet counting. That was the default display, a reminder of parameters. The actual countdown would not start until the fleet crossed the heliopause. Oduya knew that. She had run the simulation 19 times. She knew exactly what each number meant and exactly when each would arrive. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She adjusted her headset. Under her monitor, held in place by a strip of adhesive tape, was a photograph of her mother. The photograph was 14 years old. Her mother had been a diplomat. She had been on Concord Station, the great outer station at the edge of the system, when the last formal human delegation had tried to speak. She had died there. Not from violence. The official record said cardiac event. Oduya had read the coroner's notes. She had read the environmental reports from that week. She had read the accounts of the 3 other humans who were present and who survived. She did not talk about what she had concluded. That was not her job. Her job was the console. 60. The red numbers did not move yet. Oduya watched them anyway. 340 million kilometers away. On a scout vessel running dark at the heliopause, Thessaly Vex was reading. She had asked for the declassified logs 2 weeks before the fleet departed. She had received them without comment, a junior request from a junior observer, cleared under standard historical access. Nobody had flagged it. Nobody had thought it mattered. The logs were 287 years old. They described a previous incursion. Different fleet, different commander, same vector. The logs were dry incident reports, navigation data, sensor readings. What they described was this: a fleet had entered the Sol system. There had been silence, then light, then nothing. The logs were 4 pages long. The last entry was from the fleet's second-in-command, who had observed from outside effective range. It read, "I confirm receipt of distress signal. I confirm 0 response to hail. I confirm no wreckage consistent with explosive event. I cannot confirm weapon type. I cannot confirm origin of effect. I can confirm the fleet is gone. All 800 ships, no debris field, no energy signature, gone." Thessaly read the report twice. She set it down. She looked out the viewport at the dark. She said nothing. Her father's fleet was 340 million kilometers behind her, moving at standard cruise speed, 72 hours from the heliopause. She had filed her position as forward observation, standard assignment for an observer on a senior officer's staff. She picked up the report, read it a third time. Put it down. Said nothing. Korath Vex broadcast his ultimatum at hour 68. It went out on standard Concord frequencies, directed at Earth. He had composed it himself. He was a man who composed his own messages. "Earth is unregistered space," he said. "You are in violation of Concord expansion protocols. You have 60 seconds to acknowledge this transmission and signal compliance. Failure to comply will be interpreted as active resistance." He paused. His hand rested on the armrest of his command chair, a habit from 23 campaigns, touching the same spot before the order that would not be refused. "You have 60 seconds. The transmission lasted 31 seconds. He had included a standard preamble. He had not needed to. On Luna Station, Tanaka Akafor heard it in real time. She was sitting at her desk. She had a fresh cup of tea in her hands, jasmine, hot this time, the jade green of it still swirling. She did not reply. She lifted the cup. The silver seam on the cracked ceramic caught the light again. She drank. The 60 seconds passed. She did not reply. On Mercury Station, Oduya watched the number change. 60 had become 60, still static, still default display. But her console registered the fleet crossing the heliopause at hour 68, minute 12. The Crucible's outer sensors had logged it automatically. The geometry engine had begun its calculation. She did not start the countdown manually. That was not her job. The system started itself. 60. The numbers held for one breath. Then 59.59. Oduya put both hands flat on the console. She looked at her mother's photograph, 14 years old, 2 months before the cardiac event that wasn't, a woman with a diplomat's careful smile and her daughter's same steady eyes. "Okay," Oduya said quietly to no one. She watched the numbers. The Crucible had been built in the 73 years following the first incursion. Before that, there had been the question. The question was, what do you build when you cannot fight in the conventional sense? When your ships are outgunned and your population is a fraction of the smallest conquered member state? When the galaxy has decided that the species that invented radio and penicillin and calculus and the blues is, by the numbers, irrelevant? You build something else. It had taken 14 engineers in the first generation, then 140, then thousands, across 12 generations of maintenance crews who had never seen an incursion and had never been told, officially, what the nodes would do. They had been given schematics. They had been given maintenance protocols. They had been given geothermal tap coordinates and orbital insertion windows. They had built a religion without doctrine. 14,000 nodes, each one anchored, Mercury's crust, Venus's orbital shadow, the asteroid belt's L-points, Earth's own quiet neighborhood, each one linked, each one cold and patient and waiting, the way things built for a purpose wait, not eager, except that Voss used that word and Voss was not wrong. They had been waiting for 287 years. The geometry engine had run the calculation in 11 seconds. At second 12, the Crucible registered fleet mass, 2,400 ships, 4.2 million tons. Inward vector confirmed. At second 19, the geometry engine calculated optimal engagement geometry. The lattice resolved into a single configuration, not 14,000 separate systems, but one structure spanning 280 million kilometers of inner solar system, anchored at every point, patient at every node. At second 27, the Crucible pinged Luna Station. The tone was a frequency Oduya had only heard in simulations. She had run the simulations 19 times. She had never heard the tone in the real world. It was a note that lived in the space between heartbeats. Her hands did not shake. On the scout vessel, Thessaly Vex saw the nodes activate. She had not known what she was looking at. She had been running passive sensor sweeps, standard observation protocol, when her board lit up. Not with the fleet's position. Not with anything her training had prepared her for. 14,000 points of light in the dark, waking up at the same time. She had searched her logs for the word. She had found it in an old technical addendum, buried in the declassified files, written by an engineer who had been present at the first test activation 280 years ago. Lattice. Father, she said, into a comm channel she knew was too far to reach him in time. We need to. The nodes were not individual weapons. They were a single structure. The solar system was a web, and the web was waking. 30 seconds left. 29 seconds. Oduya had trained for this since she was 19. She had run the simulation in her sleep, the numbers counting, the tone from the Crucible, the moment her hands would either shake or not. She had always wondered in the quiet part of the night whether she would be the kind of person whose hands held. Her hands held. 28, 27, 26. She watched the screen. She did not pray. She did not speak. She breathed the way she had been taught to breathe in pressure drills, slow in, slow out, the way you breathe when the numbers are going one direction and you can't make them go the other, and all you can do is be steady. Her mother's photograph was taped under the monitor. The photograph was 14 years old. Her mother had been a careful woman, a patient woman. Oduya had always thought patience was a sad thing, the quality of people who had been told to wait so many times they forgot they were waiting. She understood it differently now. 25, 24, 23. On the scout vessel, Thessaly was already moving. She had not made the decision. It had made itself, somewhere between reading the report the third time and watching 14,000 nodes wake up at once. The math was simple. The fleet was 340 million kilometers behind her. The lattice was active. The geometry engine had already resolved its configuration. She reversed her vector at second 38. Her crew said nothing. They had seen what she had seen on the passive sensors. They were not the kind of people who asked questions when the answer was written across every screen in the ship. Log it, Thessaly said. Logged, her navigator said. That was all. The scout vessel turned. It ran. Behind it, in the dark, the Vorthani fleet kept moving, 2,400 ships, 890,000 crew, the largest military force the Concord had deployed in 600 years, carrying Korath Vex's certainty forward at cruise speed toward the inner system. Thessaly did not look back. 22, 21, 20. Korath had been standing for the last 12 minutes. He did not sit during approaches. That was a habit from his third campaign, when a commander who had been sitting made a decision 2 seconds slower than he needed to. Korath had stood at his console for every approach since 23 campaigns. He had not been late once. He was not thinking about the 41-second stories. He had stopped thinking about them the morning the fleet departed. The stories were what small civilizations told themselves to feel less small. He had heard them on 8 other worlds. He had seen what happened when the stories met actual fleet strength. He had learned nothing from that. That was the thing about Korath. He had learned nothing, not because he was stupid, but because he had never been given a reason to. Not once in 847 years had the universe told him it had different plans. His hand rested on the armrest of his command chair. The same spot, the same pressure, a habit from 23 campaigns. He was watching his forward sensors when the tone changed. Not his sensors. Something in the ship's ambient feed, a frequency register, running passive, the kind of thing you ignore for years because it has never done anything. It did something now. A note in a range that had no name in the fleet's signal catalogs. A note that, if you had heard it before, you would have recognized as the Crucible saying, "I see you." Koreth had not heard it before. He looked at the frequency register. He looked at it for 0.4 seconds. He did not understand what he was looking at. 1817. On Luna Station, Tanaka Akifer set down her cup. Not because anything had happened yet, because the tea was gone. The last sip had been cold. She had let it sit too long, the way she always did when she was thinking. And she had drunk it anyway, jasmine thin and cool against the back of her throat. She washed the cup in the small sink behind her desk. The water was warm. The soap smelled of nothing. She ran her thumb along the silver seam in the ceramic, the kintsugi line that ran from rim to base, the repair that had cost more than the cup and that she had paid for anyway, because some things are worth fixing even when you could just replace them. She dried the cup, set it on her desk. The badge beside it, the small bronze pin she had worn for 14 years, the one she touched sometimes without meaning to, cold metal on cold mornings, was warm. She looked at it. She had not expected that. She had known the crucible would activate. She had known the geometry engine would resolve. She had known the 41 seconds would come, but she had not thought about the badge. She had not planned for it to warm. She picked it up, held it in her palm. 16, 15, 14. The crucible registered the unyielding Dominion at second 13. The unyielding Dominion was Koreth's flagship, 1.8 million tons, the largest ship in the fleet, its name painted across its bow in letters 4 meters high. It was the lead vessel. It had taken point on every approach in Koreth's command tenure. It had been the first ship through 11 different defensive perimeters. It was the first ship the lattice touched. 13, 12, 11. Koreth's hand was still on the armrest. Same spot, same pressure. He was looking at the frequency register, trying to decide if it was a malfunction when the ship stopped shaking. That was the wrong way to say it. The ship had not been shaking. The ship had been making all the sound ships make, the hum of the drives, the faint percussion of recycled air, the structural creak of 1.8 million tons moving through space. Those sounds had been there for 68 hours. They stopped. Not gradually, not with a warning, they stopped. The unyielding Dominion did not shake. It did not flash. It did not explode. The ship did not experience any of the things ships experience when something goes wrong, because nothing went wrong in any sense the ship could register. The molecular bonds destabilized. At the atomic level, below the level of any sensor, below the level of any human nervous system, below the level of any experience, the matter that made the unyielding Dominion chose a different configuration. 0.003 seconds. 4.2 million tons became constituent atoms, not an explosion, not a fire, a perfect sphere of silent dissolution, 60 meters across at the moment of resolution, expanding outward at the speed the lattice had been designed for. No heat, no light, no sound. The ship ceased. The black box on the unyielding Dominion did not record an explosion. It recorded silence, and then, 0.4 seconds before the end, a voice. Koreth Vex spoke one word his daughter had not heard in 200 years. The black box recorded it. The black box would record everything. sealed in a casing designed to survive events that could not be designed for, tumbling free of where the ship had been, moving on the same inward vector at the same cruise speed, carrying the last sound Korath Vex ever made through the dark toward a Concord that would not receive it for 4.2 years. The word was wait. Not a command, not a protest. A word in the shape of a man who had finally understood something, 0.4 seconds before understanding became irrelevant. He had thought of his daughter. The logs would confirm this, not from anything he said, but from the biometric data the black box captured in his last half-second, pupils dilating, blood pressure dropping, the electrochemical signature of a specific kind of grief, a face appearing in the mind. The face of someone you have not spoken to in the right ways for a very long time. He had thought of Thessaly. The last thing Fleet Marshal Korath Vex, 847 years old, conqueror of 11 worlds, spoke was her name. No, not her name, the word you say to someone you love when you realize you should have turned around earlier. Wait. It did not reach her. The propagation moved at the speed of light. Unmaking, silent unmaking, unmaking at the speed of light. The 800 capital ships behind the unyielding Dominion went at second 41.03. No debris, no energy signature, the same sphere of dissolution, again and again and again, until the space where the vanguard had been held only the faint chemical trace of matter that had been organized and was no longer. The 1,200 support vessels went at second 41.07. The 400 troop carriers 12 million kilometers back, running slower, carrying the ground assault units that Korath had not expected to need, but had brought as a matter of form, went at second 41.19. 2,400 ships, 890,000 crew. Gone the way the first fleet had gone. Gone the way the logs had described, no explosion, no wreckage, no sign of struggle. Gone as though the system had simply looked at them and decided they had never needed to be there. The black box continued on its inward vector. It would reach Mercury's orbital path in 11 days. It would be collected. It would be logged. It would be sealed and placed on a courier ship, and that ship would leave the Sol system on a heading toward the Galactic Concord, and it would travel for 4.2 years, and then someone in the Hall of Arbitration would press play. By then, the galaxy would already know. The word Korath Vex could not say in time would take 4.2 years to arrive. The silence that answered his ultimatum had already left. On Mercury Station, the countdown reached 0 and stopped. Oduya looked at it for a long moment. She looked at her mother's photograph. She looked at the clean numbers on the screen, no alarms, no alerts, no damage reports, because there was nothing to report damage to. She pulled the photograph free of the tape. She held it in both hands, her mother's careful smile, her mother's patient eyes. She did not cry. That was not a rule she had made for herself. It was simply not what happened. She felt something move through her that did not have a clean name, not pride, not grief, not the satisfaction of a thing done right. Something older, the feeling of a long wait reaching its end. She set the photograph on top of the console, not tucked under it, on top. She adjusted her headset. She filed her post-event report in the standard format, 3 sentences, clipped and professional, the way she had been trained. Then she sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a while. Tanaka Akafor sent the transmission at hour 68, minute 53. 7 words. She sent it on Korath's open channel, the same frequency he had used for his ultimatum, still live, still broadcasting across the inner system and out toward the heliopause where there was nothing left to receive it. 41 seconds. You had 41 seconds to turn back. She did not raise her voice. She did not lower it. Her voice was the same voice she used for maintenance briefings and crew evaluations and cold tea on quiet mornings. It was the voice of someone who had been waiting a long time and had prepared what she would say. She closed the channel. She would not conquer, she would not avenge, she would remember. The badge on her desk was warm. She picked it up and pinned it back to her jacket. The first time in 14 years she had worn it in her own quarters, not at a formal function, not for a Concord representative, not for anyone at all. She pinned it because it was warm and because some things are worth wearing when you finally know what they mean. She poured another cup of tea. She sat. Thessaly received the transmission at hour 69, while her ship was still running outbound. She was not surprised by what it said. She had read the logs. She understood the math. What surprised her was the voice, not what she had expected from a woman who had kept humanity's silence for 14 years. She had expected something harder, something triumphant. What she heard was a woman who had been patient. She played it once. She did not play it again. She had a copy of the black box's recovery coordinates from the Crucible's post-event log, forwarded automatically to all vessels in the system. She plotted a course. Her navigator looked at the coordinates, looked at her, and asked no questions. She would not conquer, she would not avenge, she would remember. She had read the 287-year-old logs 3 times. She had seen the lattice wake. She had watched her father's fleet cease to exist on her passive sensors, not as fire, not as wreckage, but as a sudden absence where 2,400 ship signatures had been. She had felt the thing Korath had never felt in 847 years, the experience of being told no in a language that could not be argued with. She carried it. She did not know yet what she would do with it. The black box would take 11 days to reach Mercury. She would be there when it arrived. She would carry it herself, 4.2 light-years to the Concord, in the small scout vessel that had turned back at second 38, because someone had to bring it, and because the truth her father could not say needed someone to say it for him. She looked out the viewport at the dark. Her father's last word would reach her eventually. She did not know that yet. When she found out, she would be in the hall of arbitration, watching archivist Yal press play on a recording she had carried for 4 years, and she would hear the word and she would understand something she had been circling for a very long time. But that was later. Archivist Yal received the transmission in his 4th year of waiting. He was 4,204 years old. He had filed his 848th warning the day after the fleet departed, a formal addendum to his previous record, noting the fleet's departure vector and citing the historical precedent. He had filed it at the Standard Office, and he had received, as he always did, an automated receipt. No response. No acknowledgement. He had gone home. He had waited. When the courier ship arrived and the black box was logged and the call came to his office, not an automated receipt, a call, a real one, from a junior clerk who sounded like she did not know what she was holding. He had taken his time getting there. He was old. He took his time doing most things. He played the black box once. The full recording, every sensor log, every biometric reading, the frequency of the silence that preceded the unmaking, the geometry of the dissolution, and at the end, 0.4 seconds before the end, the voice. One word. He sat with it for a long time. Then Thessaly Vex came through the gallery door. She had traveled 4.2 light-years. She was not the same person who had read the logs on a scout vessel at the heliopause. Her face was older. Her eyes were the same. She walked to where Yal was sitting, the same bench in the observer gallery, the same view down to the speaking floor, and she set the black box case on the seat beside him. She sat down. They did not speak. The hall of arbitration was empty. The speaking platform stood in the center of the floor, lit from above, its polished surface reflecting the lights in the way it had for 12,000 years. The Concord had already been told. The vote that authorized the fleet had already been answered. The news had come before Thessaly arrived, traveling on frequencies faster than a ship. The silence, the absence, the 2,400 ships that had not come back, and the Concord had heard it and had gone very quiet. The kind of quiet that is not like any other quiet. Yal touched the badge on his lapel. He had worn it for 847 years. He had filed 848 warnings. He had been ignored 848 times. He was old and he was tired and he had never stopped, not once, not even when the world had made it very clear it was not listening. The badge cooled, the stars turned, the cup held.